Why is it always one side trying to cancel the other? Why is the left always trying to obliterate the right? Political reasons, of course. But as I look at it, the right is seeming pretty darn tolerant when you hear what's coming out of the left these days, including out of the mouth of the current president of the United States, as well as Bernie Sanders and a few choice others, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, what do you know, it turns out is a capitalist. I'm going to get to that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. And this is a comment from President Joe Biden. He apparently thinks that all the misinformation, which, by the way, we can talk about just exactly what misinformation is. I mean, they tried to tell us Hunter's laptop was all misinformation, that there was no investigation into any of it, just the Russians trying to mess with us. But turns out there was. Anyway, he thinks that, quote, misinformation is being spouted by all of 12 people on the internet, and that accounts for the entire problem. So what's he doing? Making lists, checking them twice, taking names. My gosh, it's like we're back in the age of McCarthyism. I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting really tired of it. But you know what? I'm also getting really worried. And you should be too. I'm getting worried because now the left has more power than they've ever had before. And if they jump into bed any more than they're already in bed with big tech, then guess what? Those other points of view out there, including mine, including probably yours if you're watching me right now, they're not going to be tolerated. Listen to what Bernie Sanders is saying. He says that, quote, the Republican Party is all about conspiracy theories, voter suppression, and climate denial. Quote, they cannot be allowed to prevail. That's what he's saying. If anybody thinks differently, that's suddenly a conspiracy theory that needs to be rooted out. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. You want to talk conspiracy theory. How about the grand old conspiracy theory that led the news every single night on all the left-wing mainstream media outlets for years? Remember, Donald Trump stole the election from Hillary Clinton with the help of the Russians? Oh, that's what we heard. Hillary Clinton was the rightful winner, you see, had it not been for the Russians. I mean, what the heck do they think that was other than a conspiracy theory? I mean, it's all how you look at it, I guess. They're going to say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, right? And then the other says, oh, wait a second, we're looking at it this way. But my gosh, your side sounds like a conspiracy theory. We can go back and forth all day long on this. The problem is whoever's in power is going to use it to their advantage. They want more power. This is about power. This is about politics. So they will pressure in a very authoritarian move some of the big tech companies to do exactly what they want. I'll tell you this, we don't do that as conservatives. We really don't. We don't go that low because we believe actually in freedom of thought, freedom of expression. We may not like it, but we don't actually try to root it out the way they are right now. And that's exactly what they're doing. So Jen Psaki, who's the White House press gal, the flack that tells you whatever she thinks the Democratic Party wants you to hear, not a very bright woman. You're not going to believe what she's been saying. Absolutely not going to believe. And you should be very concerned. I'm going to get to that in a second. But first, we have a word from one of our sponsors. And you know how crazy this market has been, right? All over the place. Like one day we're up 725, the next day, or down, I should say 725. Then we're up 600. I mean, I would anticipate that there's going to be increasingly more volatility in the future. I mean, this is what it's become about, in part because there's a lot of changes that are about to happen, economically speaking, and we need to be prepared for this. But it's not just economically that we're seeing a shift, right? Overall, there's a shift right now. There's a shift because this administration believes in socialism. Socialism, where you effectively redistribute wealth. You take from those that earn and you give to those that aren't earning, and you try and somehow create equal outcomes, which is absolutely impossible, right? Like mathematically impossible. But this is what they're trying to do. And so I would anticipate increasingly that you will see inflation, you will see volatility. And so for one of those reasons, you need to look at diversifying your portfolio. And I think when you diversify your portfolio, you should be looking specifically at gold, because gold has, has survived, shall we say, throughout all of it. The test of time. It survived the test of time. And that's the one thing where you can kind of protect and shield yourself a little bit. Again, remembering that you need that diversified portfolio. So if you're interested in investing in gold, I want you to give these folks at Legacy Precious Metals a call. I do think that you should be investing in this space. And you can tell them I sent you, 866-473-6204, 866-473-6204, legacypminvestments.com. You know, they've been in this space for more than 40 years and they've seen it all and they're used to dealing with lots of different kinds of investors with different kinds of portfolios. And so you really should go to them. legacypminvestments.com, 866-473-6204. You see the number on the bottom of the screen. But again, as we look at what's unfolding here, whether it be economically, whether it be socially, I think that the bottom line is our First Amendment is under attack, right? Because you can't speak freely now or someone's going to cancel you. I mean, how do we advance as a society like that? How do you continue to grow when we've got these not so swift political hanger-ons like Jen Psaki there in the White House, or the politicians themselves, which, let's face it, are not that bright. They're just kind of, stand-up dolls. I mean, for goodness sakes, the current president campaigned from his basement, never really wanted to ever talk about policy or economics. And now all of a sudden, everybody's waking up to the realization that he's kind of a socialist, not just a socialist, an authoritarian one at that. So what are we dealing with, really? Maybe this is a version of communism? That's what we're creeping towards? She says, this is Jen Psaki, we are in regular touch with social media platforms flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation. She, I guess, doesn't have anything better to do, really. And then she goes on to say, quote, you shouldn't be banned from one platform and not from others for providing misinformation out there. Whoa. Okay. All right, let's back up. First of all, misinformation, as we've spoken about, whether it's disinformation or misinformation. She's specifically tweeted out, of course, that it was Russian disinformation or misinformation that Hunter Biden had that darn laptop, right? Of course, now it turns out that the FBI is investigating the whole thing. I mean, they shut down the Twitter account of the New York Post as a result of that story. But no, just misinformation. Except it's not. Anyway, that's an issue. But even bigger here is the fact that she somehow believes that if you are shut down on one platform, you should be shut down on every platform. Again, authoritarianism, right? Because in a free society, you should have the ability to go to many, many different platforms, right? I mean, think of how crazy that is. Has anybody there ever heard of free market capitalism? What our nation was founded on. Competition, different businesses, different viewpoints. You heard me say in yesterday's podcast how important this really is and why I'm on a variety of different platforms. Because it's critical that we help support some of these smaller platforms. Facebook, that's the biggie. Big kid in town obviously has a tremendous following, but at what point is Facebook then at risk of becoming a monopoly on speech, especially if the White House is telling Facebook whether something can be posted or not? Think about that. Think about what's actually transpiring here. The White House wants to prevent you from seeing certain things. And they're working with social media giants, flagging certain pieces of content, and they want all the social media companies to be on board with this viewpoint. And heck, the tech companies, they're so darn scared. They're so afraid that the administration might break them up that guess what they do? They go along with it. And so, hey, maybe they will get rid of those 12 people that are really bugging Joe Biden on Facebook. Jen Psaki saying, not only Facebook, we need to get rid of them everywhere else. You see where this is heading. You see why this is a problem. I think about schools today, that they only want to advance one particular narrative. First of all, I'm not that old, but when I was back in school, that sounds good. We actually prided ourselves on being able to discuss different topics, like nothing was off limits, right? Because frankly, an academic institution, a good one anyway, should be all about pushing one's intellect. So you need to have that freedom, the intellectual freedom, to let your mind go a little bit crazy and venture down paths that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, that you might even be morally opposed to, but you need to think through what's actually going on in the other person's head so you can better hone your argument, better understand the other side. And that requires a little bit of empathy. Sometimes I say to myself, my gosh, these people on the left, they have like no empathy, right? It's their way or the highway. Either that or they just don't have the intellectual and emotional capacity to put themselves in someone else's shoes. But actually, in some ways, I think it's more than that. I think, frankly, they're just a bunch of plain old political animals. The political wrongness of all of this is really disturbing. And it's amazing that no one on the left is willing to stick up for our First Amendment and call these people out. You know, we can't even find people out there that have the common decency, right, to stick up for something that's so basic. It's our First Amendment. What about our freedom of speech? What about all of us as individuals? Doesn't matter, you see. No. There's a cause. Clearly, there's a cause, and that is all that matters. I think it's really kind of feeling eerily similar to a kind of communist movement. I mean, I've said socialism all along, right, is increasingly trying to get towards communism if they get their way. But increasingly, when you look at this rhetoric and you think about who it's coming from, the left really is moving closer and closer to a system of government that has failed every single country that has tried it. So why are we starting this now? Power. Right? Power. Look at AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a self-described socialist who blames Cuba's problems on the U.S. Well, she just invented a whole new business for herself, investing $1.4 million in her online merchandise store to sell T-shirts that say tax the rich. Oh, hats too, with her initials on them. Apparently, she's a capitalist after all. I mean, that's what you need to remember about all of these people, whether it's the head of Black Lives Matter, who's no longer the head of it, but she was accumulating real estate to the tune of millions of dollars, going to fancy conferences where they could lounge by the pool for thousands of dollars. What is this really about? Money, power, the same things that at least capitalists admit to themselves matter. So if these socialists were honest with themselves and they were honest with the world, then they would just admit what it's really about. They're plain old simple capitalists, self-interested capitalists. That's AOC. But you see, she and they are never really going to be honest with themselves or the public, because why would you when you're in the middle of a power grab? It always is. I mean, whether it be Venezuela, whether it be Cuba, whether it be the former USSR, that's always what this is about. Power, money. It's divide and conquer. That's the message right there. Divide and conquer. So it's black versus white. It's male versus female, heterosexual versus homosexual. This is going to go on and on and on and on because, by the way, they're going to come up with all kinds of different classes of people, right? Anything you can use to divide, certainly rich versus poor. Increasingly in this environment with policies like this administration is trying to put in, we will have more rich and more poor. You've heard me talk about that hourglass economy. It's a big, big deal. I encourage you to make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. I encourage you to make sure you go and subscribe to my podcast. You can get on Spotify, you can get on Apple, iTunes, anywhere you get your podcast. Make sure you subscribe and you download that. And importantly, go to trishintel.com. Sign up for my newsletter because it is important that we protect our freedom of speech. I want you to have that direct line of communication right here to me. I hope that together we can bring Americans to their senses very, very fast. And I hope that this pendulum shifts back to some kind of normalcy, back to the middle, right? Back to America. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you tomorrow right back here.